then so I think we're recording now. Thank you, Cathy, for helping me out with this.
Wonderful.
Um,
I'm happy to talk to you.
well, it's always a joy to talk with you, Cathy. And it's interesting because we want to talk about the gift, particularly in the context of Cree and Métis situations.
Yeah.
And but you have just spent time in my ancestral ground in Scotland, and now you're in Wales. And so I'm very curious if there's any connections that you see between
Yes.
between your culture and then in Scotland and Wales.
Well, yeah. Hi, everybody. Yeah, just so I'm Cathy Richardson, Kinuisqueyu, and I am Métis, and I have Cree and Gwich'in ancestry on my maternal side, and I have some English ancestry on my father's side, and so I'm in here, Wales. Uh, And yeah, today I was walking in what I would call a medicine wheel, a circle of standing stones, and I looked up, and I was with three other friends, oh, including my daughter, and there was one of us at each of the cardinal directions. It just happened that way, and I thought, well, this is like a medicine wheel back home. Yeah, so ancient cultures, Celtic. Pre-Christian, and then we had lunch at the Druid Inn. So very uh, earth-based religions and those ancient sites and memories all over the place. So I feel quite at home in that way. Cultures that celebrate the land, basically. Land is really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And yeah, I normally say where I'm coming from too. So I'm coming from the land of the Syilx people, also known as the Okanagan people,
Yeah.
in the beautiful springtime that this land brings. And even though I don't get out much, I have this great big window in the living room where I do my dialysis, and I get to look at the spring, and it brings me much joy. So,
Mm.
yeah. So, I'm interested in exploring with you how you see the gift, particularly as it fits within the concept of the gift, particularly as it fits within Métis and Cree
Mhm.
contexts. And yeah, just start off with that with you.
Sure. Yeah, there's so many ways to come at this topic, and I've had so many teachers that I really respect. So one of the forms of my teaching was through the Sundance, which is a 4-year ritual celebration of the Cree Lakota Plains people. And if you decide to participate, you have to commit to coming for 4 years. And basically, it's 4 days of ceremony, different ceremonies spread out, and it's to honor the land, and I, in my own words, the web of life, joining with all beings, and dancing to, I guess I would say, in a way, to do some clearing for Mother Earth, to cry, to grieve, to process some of the heavy energy, the suffering, the negativity. And when you come out of it, you feel really uh you know like the Renaissance, reborn, refreshed, and elated. So some of the teachings that I have, I would talk about the web of life, but also the six directional model. So basically, it's four directions and up and down. Down
Oh,
is
yes.
Earth, up is the heavens, and so it's like a lifespan development model. So in the pre-birth way, we're up with our ancestors, and we're going to enter this wheel of life here. If we've decided to come to planet Earth, uh, before we come, we're with our loved ones, our ancestors, and it's like we make a plan. What is it that we want to learn this time round? and we're given those kinds of gifts and qualities. And then we're born into our mother in the wheel. We're born in the east where the sun rises, and into the realm of childhood, infanthood, toddlerhood, childhood. And we come with gifts, and each aspect of this wheel of life provides us the opportunities to develop the gifts in an age appropriate way. So, like Indigenous teaching is about adults and elders working with young people where they're at, starting, at the level of the child, storytelling, modeling, singing, all that kind of thing to help the young being get a sense of who they are and what's being reflected back to them culturally, what's being mirrored to them, who are their people, who's the community, the animals, the loved ones. So they're grounding on this earth, because it takes a while. Part of your higher self or your spirit is still partly in the other world, which is why babies, they sometimes talk to, beings that we can't see. And then we move through the wheel. So we move to the south, which is considered the area of adolescence. So the young person has these gifts inside of them, and hopefully they've been loved up and nurtured in the sense that they could go through certain phases or lessons that they needed to, and get a burgeoning sense of self. When they become a teenager, it's about connecting with that life purpose, and who am I going to be, what am I going to offer to this world,
Yes.
and how am I going to do that. And so they have to break away from the adults, and they start taking risks and experimenting. And some of these teachings, they go way back. And at that time, like a few hundreds of years ago, adolescence didn't really exist. You're probably parents by the time you're an adolescent. You probably die when you're 30. Like, life was pretty rough, right?
Mm.
And so adolescence is kind of more of a modern invention, but it's when you come to be in the world and not only recognize your gifts, but try them out and start contributing. And then we go into adulthood. And, that's the time where many have children and become parents, but they're also doing adult things, getting involved in leadership and working, and just contributing to the society or the community in whatever way. And then by the time you get to the north, you're an elder, and the elders are really connected across the wheel with the teenagers, the adolescents, because by that time they're pushing back on their parents. They're
Yes.
tired of being told what to do. And so there's this connection between elders and the youth, and of course babies and the parents. And so as we go through the wheel, these gifts are developing and they're being shared. It's always relational. um Really, like, when you have community and people that care for each other, you have everything. You don't need money, because people will feed you, and you celebrate together, work together. And so basically those are the teachings that I came up with. And then after that, when it's your time, you exit this wheel, and you go back to the sixth dimension, the heavens, and you review it all, and then decide what you want to do next. If you want to come around again, or if you just want to be a guide helper on the other side for a while. But that's basically what I learned about the wheel of life, and how gifts are imbued in us. And you could also look at it as like we're born with dignity and that life force, and sometimes it's really like kicked out of us because life is hard, and people have difficult lessons that they have to go through. But it's, I think, the opportunity to also heal and restore the dignity or the life force that's sometimes depleted from us through the harshness of living.
Mm.
That's part of our learning. Yeah.
It's very interesting. I mean, there's so much I could pick up on what you said. But one of the things that was taught me at Chehalis First Nation uh, the concept of gift is explicitly important to them. It's not like I'm imposing it on them. It's the
Yeah.
idea is explicitly important to them, but it's always connected to children.
Hmm.
And so if I ask about the gift, it will be they will talk about when a baby's born, and they will talk about the baby growing up as you just did.
Yeah.
And and then I realized when they brought me in, why they brought me in, because I was there to work with their children.
Yeah.
And I was working with them from this perspective that these children have gifts that we need to bring to light and that we need to understand and appreciate and so that fit right in with their values. So when you started talking about the gifts within that the Cree context and other contexts,
Hmm.
you started talking about children as well. But then you went right through the lifespan and beyond.
Yeah.
I love that.
Well, children come with gifts, but they also are gifts. So
Exactly.
at every place in the wheel, we all kind of have a purpose. Like, what's your job? The job of children is just to make people happy,
Oh, and don't they do it though?
to make you smile, to make you
Yes.
laugh, to make you remember when you were young, and things that are really important away from like adult worries.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hmm.
No, they are gifts and they carry gifts
Yeah.
and all of that. Uh, do you have anything in particular to say about the concept of gift within the Métis context?
Yeah. Well, we had talked about the story of the giving tree, and
Oh, I
I
loved
love
it, right?
that. Yeah, and I think I shared that with someone else, and they had something similar in their own culture. But this idea that a tree could hold gifts for travelers. I was sitting by a river in Devon with a friend who
Mhm.
talked about these trees, and they were Scotch pines in the middle of a different kind of forest. And she said she was told or realized that they were markers for people that would go to and from the market, and they indicated safety and generosity, like giving people permission. When you see these four pines, it means you can travel here and you can camp here, you can sleep here if you
Yeah.
need to. And it reminded me of the Giving Tree. So Leah Dorian's wrote a children's book about it. She's a Métis author, about how Métis travelers,
Yeah.
if they needed something, they would go and look in this particular tree and they would take it, like some sugar or flour, whatever, and you gave something back. And it was just a gift exchange. And so I just love that idea. That's so beautiful. And yeah, you take what you need and you give something else, and someone else may need that. So she said there was moccasins in there, and just remembered going around Batoche. You and I, you were from Saskatchewan in the old days. That's where they were traveling, and this tree, it was a secret to other people, but it provided for Métis families. So that culture of care was always built in. And we didn't always have like stores and doctors and all these modern things, although we don't have doctors anymore, really. But we had to provide for ourselves. So communal care was really important.
Well, I love the story. The as you can see it online, as a little video that
Yeah.
you sent it to me, and of a tree. But one of the things that really struck me, because in the capitalist version of um, of an exchange, it's all you're looking out for yourself, right? You're
Mm.
always looking out for yourself. It's very individualistic. And in this story, the gifts that are given, you don't even know who you're giving them to. You're just giving them because people might need them. So it's just a gift to the future, just in case. And that struck me as um, it struck me in its opposition to the capitalist form of it,
Yeah.
exchange.
I've seen different versions of that in modern day. For example, um, there's a Roundhouse Cafe in Montreal, in Cabot Square, where a lot of Indigenous people are, and many are unhoused. And so if you go into the Roundhouse Cafe and buy a meal, you pay double, and then the second meal is given to someone else who has
Really?
no money. Yeah. So that kind of paying it forward, giving, thinking
Yeah.
of, I love that.
Yes. Oh, I do too. And I love the the story of giving because you have no idea who you're giving to.
Hmm.
You don't even know if what you're giving is necessary for anybody. It's but you give, and it's in that tree, and that tree becomes symbolic of all of that.
Hmm.
Such a lovely story.
Yeah, there's feeling in there too. Like it's an act of care,
Yes.
whereas of our other interactions are so disconnected from love or emotions or
Yeah.
people feeling concern for other folks, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. An act of care.
Hmm.
Yeah. It made me think of something, and I completely forgot it.
Well, I think we're going back to these times because our structures are collapsing and imploding, and
Yeah.
yeah, we social services, things are breaking down, and once again we're going to be going back to who's around us, who's our immediate community, and how do we take care of each other in that location right there.
It also, what you're saying also reminds me of that Lynn Hoffman story with Pietro Barbetta, with the Arab man who comes to see him, and he comes in the door. Lynn's with him, and the man says, "I'm descending after this meeting. I'm descending into hell." And Lynn's question was, "You remember this, don't you? Who's who's going with you into hell?" And then Lynn put the grin or spirit of his father and his sister, and the man wanted Lynn and Pietro to come with him too. So the grin of Lynn and Pietro on. It reminded me of that giving tree for some reason.
Yeah, there's a really nice spirit in accompaniment. And I think that's in a way what you and I try to do in our communal practices of counseling is to accompany people through difficulties. And sort of, I mean, there's lots of ways to talk about it, but as a metaphor, witnessing, listening, just being with, so the person knows that they're not alone. They're being,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, accompaniment, as you say. And
Hmm.
and to this man, it meant the world to him. And Pietro said he was talking about it a long time later,
Hmm.
that he got to go to hell with these people with him.
It reminds me of a Vicki Reynolds teaching that I love. It's like, what are you able to do? Because you know that on your little spiritual support team, you have Christopher and you have Alan and Shelley or Kim, like that you are stronger because you have them there in your life as backup. They would support you. So it's not like, what would Christopher do? Should I copy that? It's more like, what can I do because I know Christopher has my back?
Well, what a great distinction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What can I do because Cathy's my friend? And with that in that context,
Yeah.
I can explore that context. Is
Yeah.
this
It's really
is
important,
this
isn't it? Yeah.
is this a Cree concept? Is this a Métis concept?
Um, well, not exclusively. I think there's something folksy about it from many communities that are still connected to, well, I'll say the land, but even in urban centers, solidarity, right? Groups of people that show care for each other, and so you and I work in so many
Yeah.
micro communities of care, whether they're people working with the unhoused or people who are ill or using substances in a way that's harmful for them, that kind of thing. There's all these little communities, and they're there, doing that for each other.
Yeah, and I like to feel I can help them out a bit, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, and one of the ways that we can wrap that care around is just to when I talk to somebody and they say, "Oh, I'm doing so much better," and I took this wonderful class with Chris Kinman, and he asked this question, like, what lies on the other side of addiction? And I
Mm.
just kept thinking about that. And then so many wonderful things happened because I didn't see people as being sick, for example. And I could say, well, does Chris know that teaching made such a difference for you in your practice? And they might say yes or no. And I say, would it be okay if I let them know that, you know, and I did get these teachings from Vicki Reynolds, that sort of like uh giving it back. And I think they're very folksy traditions, working class, like
They
letting
are.
people know that you have their back. And
Yeah.
it is about solidarity, but it's like, what goes around comes around, and we're all in this circle, and we need to hear, hey, what you did last week, that really helped that person. Yeah.
Well, in this folksy element, which ties cultures together, right?
Mhm.
So I'll give you an example. Years ago, I was working with a young woman, and Indigenous young woman, and she was going through some hard time, and her grandmother brought her together with her uncles and aunts and cousins and uh, elders, and they brought her into the middle of a room. They put her in the middle of the room and they wrapped her in a blanket.
Yeah.
And then they all talked about what they were calling from her, what they expected from her, what they saw in her.
Yeah.
She told me this story. Then I was going through another situation in my work with a young man who was going through a very difficult time. And this young woman suggested, why don't you do the blanket ceremony?
Mhm.
So I gathered this young man in his home with his mom and dad, very much a working class poverty kind of home,
Yeah.
and and the grandma, his grandma, and we put him in the room and wrapped him in a blanket,
Mhm.
and everyone went around and said what they saw in him, and his tattoo covered father, who often seemed really tough and rough. All he could say when he came to talk about his son was, love you, son. And that's all he could get out through his tears, right?
Yeah.
Then I started sharing this story, and someone from Norway told me, oh, we do that in Norway too. And I kept hearing it in the story of grandmothers and blankets.
Yeah.
And it was realized that there's something universal about this.
Yeah, I think there really is, and there isn't I can't think of an Indigenous community anywhere that doesn't have some sort of blanketing um, ceremony or intervention or process. So I use the I don't want to just say the metaphor, but the idea of blankets for the Islands of Safety project. And
Mm.
basically, I got some of the teachings from Maria Campbell, a really well-known Métis woman from Saskatchewan, and she wrote a book with Kim Anderson talking about the family. So out of that, I got this idea that I would sew basically 4 or 5 blankets on one big blanket. And when I got the families together in this process to talk about how to create safety when there had been violence in the family, we talked about the role of each blanket. So there was a blanket for the fathers and a blanket for the mothers, a blanket for the elders, and the first little one was for the children, representing the children. And so we would bring some of the children's things and put it on the blanket for the children, and maybe the photos, especially if the children had been taken into foster care. And then all this exists on the blanket that's Mother Earth. So we went through and we would talk about what does
Wow.
this blanket about the children represent? Who are these children? And then under that was the elders. And we talk about the roles of the grandmas and the grandpas and the aunties in this family, and the mums and the dads. And then almost inevitably people would say, but our family didn't really live like that anymore because of colonialism or residential school or the disruptions, the violence, whatever. But it was all related to colonial violence that ripped the families and the traditions apart, at least tried to the best that they could in that violent way. And so then we vision it again. So if we'd gotten so far in our healing and recovery from that horrible process, what would we put back together? What would be the roles of the dads and the moms? And it's different today, and not everybody's so gender specific. We have lots of two-spirit people who also have traditional roles, but we're also bringing that forward into what does it look like today and what could it look like tomorrow to meet our present day circumstances. Who's going to be around these children? And then we'd make a safety plan, and then it would be presented to the social workers, because we were always trying to get these children reinstated back in their birth family or community, and to get rid of the terrible kind of colonial mother blaming practices that try to destroy families and put everybody in compartments. So anyway, that was one way that we did use the blanket. But I just wanted to share, we had a conference last week at Concordia. It was called Resisting Colonizations. And so I was chairing a panel, and there were lots of Middle Eastern people there. And one presenter went up and he said that I have lost 67 family members this year in a war. And he said, I mentioned that at work, and nobody said anything. And then they just went back to their agendas. And so I knew, like, of course, that's completely unacceptable. So at the end, we had a blanket ceremony right there in the conference to honor that loss, to witness and acknowledge. You can't have that kind of loss without that kind of suffering, without people stopping. Wait, we have to stop, and we have to attend to this suffering right now. And then you blanket and you do a circle, and everyone shakes their hand or gives them a hug, and then you sing a song, and that's what you do. And I really learned that a lot from the Coast Salish elders. When I was working on Vancouver Island, I had some wonderful teachers like Skip Dick, just a wonderful man to work with, and really talked about when something big and bad happens, you stop. It's not business as usual. And that's why, in so many First Nations communities, when there's a death, particularly of an elder, they close the band office.
Everything stops.
Everything shuts down, and maybe for 3 days. And that's just what you do.
Yes.
It's
And
not
when you're in
business.
a close-knit community like Stehalis, that happened all the time.
Yeah.
And so everything was shut down quite regularly.
Yeah.
Just in memory of this. I just wanted to just follow back because I'm just really touched by the gift of blankets. The blanket is the gift, but the blanket carries the gifts as well, and it is so many. And the other thing that struck me, it's something that's really important to me, and that's that when there's something that happens that's tragic, we do need to stop, and we do need to give space for the people that were affected by that. And some people ask, well, where does the gift fit into all of that? And I say, well, the gift is in our stopping. The gift is in providing space for those that have suffered in this horrible, horrible way.
Yeah.
I mean, 72 relatives. And, oh,
So there's another thing that relates to, I'll just call it like mindfulness. I know that's not the right word, but when you have a blanket, somebody had some sheep and somebody sheared those sheep and
yes,
somebody spun the wool and
yes,
somebody dyed the wool and the plants were used to dye the wool and then
yes.
somebody wove it or knitted it together to make this blanket. And so there's this teaching that you don't do artisanry or crafts uh, when you're not in a good mood, when you're not in a good space. You have to do it with love. Like lots of people talk about cooking that way. You're the medicine of loving the activity goes into the activity, and that will go into, you know, the blankets or the food or the just the
Mhm.
process of creating the wool. And I think that that's one of the reasons why this like mass production is not great. You know, we buy lots of things from lots of different countries, but if we know it comes from a sweatshop, it doesn't contain that kind of love. It contains exploitation energy, right? And
Yeah.
so that's what communities, like more traditional communities, have been doing. They've been making things and they've been working with the animals and the grasses, you know, the leaves, the trees, and they weave and create things that the community uses. And it's like, you know, the elder women in Saskatchewan and the prairies, they grow sweetgrass and they pray to it when they're tending it, and then they harvest it and they offer tobacco or offerings and prayers all the time, and then they use it for healing and they give it to people. And that's why it's not okay to sell sweetgrass and sage in new age stores. It should not be sold for money, and it's so wrong, and I cringe every time I go into those stores because I love those stores, but they should not be selling this, um, because we don't sell that. It's not for sale for money, and you don't know who grew it, but it's that act of the prayer. So if somebody, elder from the prairies, gives you a braid of sweetgrass, you know that it's like imbued in love and care, and that's really important, right?
Oh, that's a, well, it's very important.
Yeah.
And thank you for drawing attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
That's very important. Um, I'm, I'm not sure if you got a chance to read anything of the document I sent you.
Yeah, I started it. I did. And I
Yeah.
started writing a few notes, but I hadn't talked to you about like what kind of feedback would you like? Because there's so many ways that we can start thinking about these things, right?
Well, I'm hoping that I'll get a transcription of this conversation and we can
Yeah.
put
Yeah.
that. But I was wondering if there's anything that kind of touched you or struck you as you were reading that we should mention.
Well, I really love learning about you and your influences and why it's so important for you at this point in your life to write about the gift. And I think that you're in a very reflective place, but also a place where like giving thanks, like you're acknowledging your teachers, Lynn
Mm,
Hoffman,
right.
Derrida, the Stahalis people,
Yeah.
particularly. And then, you know, everything you learned from them, and you shared some wonderful stories with me about salmon, right, and mountains and shadows on the mountains. So I love how you are synthesizing and just like loving, appreciating those teachers, those teachings, and why it's so important for you to do this, particularly because our field of counseling psychology never writes about the gifts. I mean, Lynn Hoffman did. I haven't, you know, like Indigenous
Yeah, Lynn
writers, they write
Hoffman was the
about this
only
all the
one.
time.
Lynn Hoffman and me were the only ones who wrote about that, I think.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
you got to
and
be
we have
careful.
lots in the Indigenous tradition,
Oh, yeah.
braiding sweetgrass. But this in the white European tradition, um, you don't see much.
Well, it's funny what I want to, because what you said reminded, kind of drew something home for me. And that's the influence of women in my life and how they're in this book. But starting off with my mother
Yeah. Yeah.
and my father, who just, I'm sure later in his years he would have denied that he had this prejudice against Indigenous people,
Hmm.
but he sure had it. And it was my mother took great risk at opposing him on this.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that that's part of my history. But then she and Lynn Hoffman and others, they all become one.
Hmm.
So there are these women that have been so important in my world. And as I'm writing this book, it kind of came out more. And then I remember I was writing it and I realized I didn't have Harleen in here. And Harleen has been a great, great support for me. And I wanted you in here, which
Yeah.
is what we're
Thanks.
doing now.
Yeah. Harleen wrote a lot of, or Dement lived about generosity and hospitality, right?
Oh, it's the same stuff.
Yeah. But I was thinking, if your parents were in a Cree community and your mother was how she was, the children would have loved her and they would have hung around her. And if they saw your dad coming in the car, they would have let the air out of his tires or chucked blackberries at it or something. Like I have wonderful stories of Métis children resisting like oppressive teachers and nuns, and that's our tradition to resist colonial oppression, right?
Yeah. Well, my younger brother certainly resisted my father,
Mm.
and in ways. Did I tell you a naughty story? You like naughty stories.
Sure.
So, um, my father was convinced my younger brother had an issue with cocaine, and he did, you know. But my mother was dying, and my father insisted that he send him to a treatment center in North Dakota
Mm.
as my mother was dying.
Mm.
And uh, you know, so he anyway, my brother was sent to the airport, and he was in, I forget which airport he was in, one of the he had to go to a bigger one in order to get to South Dakota. And he met these rock and rollers, and they weren't just rock and rollers; they were AC/DC.
Wow.
And he hung out with them, and
Hmm.
they said, "Come with us, come with us." And so instead of going to the treatment center, he hung out with AC/DC and traveled
Oh,
with
oh, that's beautiful. I love it. Yeah, so good. Yeah.
And I didn't find out about this till years later, but it was like, oh, that's what a fabulous story.
Oh, that's great. Yeah,
But
I really appreciate the things you wrote about your mom.
oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, she was very uh I never know how to pronounce it. Ingenuous, creative in finding ways to connect with young people, hey?
Well, the one thing I didn't write and I'd like to share because it connects, and I told you this story, I
Yeah.
believe. That was she was very, very sensitive to the Cree children that came to her classroom,
Yeah.
and she was pioneering special education for children with learning difficulties. And so sometimes the Indigenous children were sent to the classroom, and this boy was sent to her classroom, and he was so scared he ran under the table and hid.
Mhm.
And I found out about this story at my mother's funeral from her principal.
Mm.
But I found out that my mother found a book that was about an Indigenous boy,
Mhm.
children's book, and she crawled under the table and read it to him.
Mm.
That really affected me.
Yeah. So beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know you paint. Wouldn't that be a lovely painting?
I tell you something I discovered about my painting,
Uh-huh.
because in the book you probably haven't read this far yet, or it probably isn't even in what I sent you. But I have this theological section, and in the theological section, I talk about Thompson Highway,
Hmm.
and where he talks about uh, the god of the boreal forest
Hmm.
being a mother god, a female god, and the forest is the god. And so I put it in the theological section in there.
Yeah. Hmm.
But it dawned on me that, because most of the paintings I paint are wildlife, and
Hmm.
they're almost all wildlife from the boreal forest,
Yeah.
where I grew up as a kid.
Hmm.
And it was like, so reading that from Thompson Highway just evoked for me this sense of, I know this place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so well, since we last spoke, a friend of mine was at a writing retreat in Banff with Thompson Highway. So I tell him that he's got a couple fans over here. Yeah. Say hi
Oh,
to
I
us.
love what he wrote. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
is there
Such
any,
a beautiful
yeah.
grasp of the interaction in nature. And he actually had a story in one of his books that I was just reading that was similar to my mom about the baby on the dog sled that takes off and the mom's running after the dog sled and the baby. That happened to my grandma. And my aunt Pat was on the sled and she had to run. And what my mom remembers is my mom was a toddler and my grandma pushed her out of the way so she could run after the sled, and my mom was crying because she felt like, hurt. But this dog was taken off with the dog sled was taking off with my auntie Pat.
Well,
So
that'd be terrifying.
I know, and he wrote about that with his mom, the same kind of thing. So I felt a wonderful moment of delight and shared experience there.
Oh, I just, well, that's wonderful. I love his writings.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
he's a true citizen of the world. If that term ever fit for anyone, it fit for him. It's,
yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Now, is there anything else that you would want to add about the idea of the gift, and particularly, well, in any context, but particularly keeping in mind its
Mhm.
indigenous roots?
Well, I like what you wrote about before that like it's not transactional. It's not I give you something and then you give me something. It's that we all exist in the circle of the
Yes.
gift. The gift
Yeah.
flows amongst us and between us. And I think it's something to do with the heart as well. Like we mentioned, generosity, but just that when we have lovely things bestowed upon us or lots of blessings in life, we really get excited about it when we can share them with other people. Right.
Yes, we do. We do.
Yeah.
Thank you, my friend. You are a gift to me, and you are a carrier of gifts as
Oh,
well. And our friendship is one of those gifts.
yeah, for sure. I'll keep that here. And thank you. Yeah, thank you for wanting to talk to me about this. And certainly I value all our exchanges and the supervisions that we're doing together with all these wonderful people that show up. That's a gift. It's like timeless when we get into
I know.
these conversations with people. It's like time disappears and we just go into this space and then suddenly 3 hours have gone by and we don't know. So I think that's a sign that we're in this
Oh,
exchange.
I think so. One of the things that moved me in my research on this was Jacques Derrida saying that the only true gift is a gift of time,
Mm,
and really nothing else matters.
yeah.
And I realized how anti-capitalist that was, because in the capitalist society we've commodified time. And so we don't have time. You talk to people, they don't have time. I don't have time.
Mm-hmm.
And but we create time, and you and I, we create context where we give people time,
Yeah.
and it's meaningful, and it's wonderful. Um,
Mhm.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Christopher. And thanks everyone who's listening.
Thank you,
And
Kenneth
yeah, I
Squayo.
hope this was a good time.
Thank you, Kenneth Squayo.
Hi, 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 Ska. Yeah,
And we'll talk soon.
we will.
Take
Okay.
care.
Hi,
Bye.
hi. Bye.